The story took place about 100 plus years ago, and it revolves around the Sanzer Rebbe, uh, obviously a big tzaddik. And on one occasion, a certain man came to the Rebbe, and he was trying to find the financial means to marry off his daughter, but he literally didn't have any money to work with. And he pleaded and he begged with the Rebbe to try and find a way to help him. So the Rebbe told him that he should find a way to get to Vienna. And when he got to Vienna, he should find a gentleman by the name of Nachum ben Yosef. And he should go there and he should ask him for 500 gold pieces, not a penny less. So this man says, how will I find him? And Vienna is such a faraway place, and I've got a horse, but it's an old horse, and I don't even know if I can get there, and all these things. But eventually the Rebbe convinced him, and he had trust that if the Rebbe said that it would work out, it would work out. And he told him that when you get there, you should go to any shul. It didn't really matter, and someone there would be willing to take you to Nachum ben Yosef for probably about 5 silver pieces. And then again, just you have to stay adamant, no matter what he says, to not leave there without receiving 500 gold pieces. Okay. So he went home and he spoke to his wife about it, and should I do it? Should I not do it? I don't know if the horse can even make the journey, and even so, I need provisions. I need whatever. And they both came to the conclusion: if the Rebbe said to do it, you should do it. So he decided he was going to sell off this old horse of his, and with the money, find a way to make transport and to take provisions for the trip, and the amount he needed, the 5 silver pieces he would need, in order to pay off the gentleman that he would find at shul, supposedly, to take him to this gentleman, Nachum ben Yosef. So he comes to Vienna, and right away he enters the first shul like he was told, and he asks the first person he sees there, the shamash, the gabbai, do you know a Nachum ben Yosef? The man says, of course, I know a Nachum ben Yosef. I'll take you to him for 5 silver pieces. He says, okay, this is going well. Great. So he gets taken to this gentleman, and you could imagine the gentleman was quite wealthy. He was a nobleman, and he sits him down in his office, and he says, what can I help you with, sir? And he says, well, I've been sent here by the Sanzer Rebbe to collect money for a wedding so that I can marry off my daughter. And the Rebbe was adamant that I should not leave here with less than 500 gold pieces. The guy's eyes went up. He says, listen, with all respect to the Rebbe, I don't know where he comes up with this idea that, such a huge amount. Listen, I can give you 5 gold pieces. That's, that'll do the job. But 500? Are you crazy? I don't know where he came up with that I would give you that amount. And he says, nope, I will not leave. I refuse to leave this office. I will not get out of this chair. The Rebbe told me, and I'm going to be adamant about it. So the man said, listen, okay, fine, maybe I can find a way to, maybe I'll give 15 gold pieces, but 500, no way. I'm sorry, that's like a small fort, no way. And this carried on for about a half an hour. He would eventually up his price a bit. This man that was sent by the Sanzer took his word so seriously that there was just nothing that this man could say that would make him leave the office for less than the amount. Finally, after half an hour, the wealthy man just didn't know what to do. So he said, give me a second. And he went over to his wife and he said, listen, the craziest thing, but this Sanzer Rebbe has sent this man here, and this man refuses to get out of my office for less than 500 gold pieces. So immediately she said, did you say the Sanzer Rebbe? And he says, yes, I did. He says, well, in that case, give him the full amount. Okay, but why? She says, okay, well, I got to tell you a story in a sense. You remember a few years ago, she said, we went for a wedding, to some relatives in that, and she described it, and he was like, oh yeah, I remember what. So she's like, yeah. So we went a few hours journey to that city in order for that wedding. Now I don't know if you know this, but basically at the day of the wedding, the rabbis that were supposed to be in charge of the ceremony all of a sudden last second refused to do the wedding ceremony. And everyone, the families were worried, and all the guests were there, and everything was paid for, and they were like, they didn't know what to do. Without a rabbi, you can't really have a wedding. And the reason that the rabbis refused to do the wedding was because no one knew the groom. There was no one there that knew of him, knew about him. He had no family members there, no even friends there. It was so that, they weren't sure about his past. They couldn't even verify in a sense that maybe he was Jewish. Whatever it was the case, that none of the rabbis were willing to do it. And all of a sudden they found out that at the same exact time, the sons of Rebbe happened to be visiting in that city. And someone spoke to him and he agreed that he would come and conduct the wedding. So the sons of Rebbe sat down amongst all the family and the friends, and they were so excited that they finally found a rabbi that was willing to do this, but he hesitated to start the ceremony. And he just sat there kind of pensive for a while. And finally, he spoke up and he said to the mother and father of the bride-to-be, he said, so this is your only daughter? And they said, yeah. And he says, but it's not the only child you've had, right? I said, well, yeah, I don't know how you knew that, but yeah, that's correct. He says, what happened to your other child? So they said, oh, well, this was long time ago, but, we went out for a family trip out into the forest, and it was around, I think, I don't know, winter time or whatever it was, and they kind of described that. And at the time, they had a young boy as well, and all of a sudden, the boy disappeared, and they went searching for him, and they couldn't find him, and they kind of came to the conclusion that he must have fell into the lake and passed away. So the Sanzer Rebbe said to them, was there any, by chance, like distinguishing marks that that was unique to this young boy? They said, well, yeah, actually, he had a really big scar on just above his knee. He once fell onto a tree stump, and it gave him a big gash, so he had this scar there. So again, the Sanzer thought for a moment, and he turned to the soon-to-be groom, and he said, do you mind, can you roll up your pant legs a bit, your pants? And so, the groom to be obliged, and he pulled up, and lo and behold, there on top of his knee was the exact distinguishing mark that they had spoken of, this gash. And it was realized that he would be marrying his sister, that this boy had gone missing for a long time, and the parents thought he was completely, he had passed away, and no one thought much about it. And now, on the day of the wedding, they came and they finally realized that the two that were about to get married were indeed brother and sister, and so the Sanzer managed, so to speak, to save the day. But it was such a wondrous means of saving the day that right away people that heard of it and people that were there were just floored by it, and people came and asked for blessings and this and that. So the wife continues, I was there, and right away, I pledged to the Rebbe that I would like to give a big sum of money, to the tzaddik, to do with it what he will, just in order to receive a blessing. And I pledged to give 500 gold pieces. And he said to me, no. I don't want you to give me 500 gold pieces. There's going to come a time when I will send someone to you to retrieve that 500 gold pieces. And so she said to her husband, so you see, this was a pledge that I had made long ago, and finally I get to make good on. But she says that's not all, actually. She said that young man in the story that was the groom that turned out to be the brother. Well, he turned out he became our son-in-law. He eventually, that same young man, married our daughter. So that's the story, and the connection to the Parsha of the week is this week's Parsha does speak about, improper relationships between siblings, between children and their parents and the like. So that is our story for the Parsha. Now, so the question then is, we know that there is a story that Lot and Abraham, Lot is Abram's nephew, and Lot decides, and Abram decides that they just, whatever, better that they part, and Lot goes and settles in Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abram eventually, these angels go there after Abram convinces God, what if there's this many righteous people, this many righteous, and eventually it's decided that there is not even that minimum amount of righteous people that God's still going to destroy. So these two angels go there, and Lot and his two daughters are saved. Okay. Now they find refuge in a cave, and while in this cave, they think that the world has ended. And somehow you could say that it's a strange thing, but they found, he found some kind of a fermented, drink there, wine, and he figured, I guess, some people react differently when they think the world's ended and you're the only people left. On the girls' minds was, we have to, repopulate the world, and there's only one man. On his mind was, well, I'm just going to get drunk, right? When the world goes down the drain and you don't really know what to do, some, people react in different ways. So he gets drunk. And the older daughter jumps on the opportunity, and she says, this is our, we've got to repopulate the world. It's a mitzvah. And so she goes ahead and she has relations with her father. And from this, we have the nation Moab. Moab literally means from my father, Moab. Mi ha'abashali. And then she convinces the younger daughter the following day to have relations with the father as well. He didn't learn his lesson. He still got drunk. And from that would come Ammon. So first of all, there's some lessons that our sages learn from this. One, that there's a statement in the Gemara that sometimes it's interesting that a good deed for the wrong intention, they liken to a sin for the right intention. So it's crazy to think that a good deed can somehow be equal to a sin, but in this instance, they make that equation, and they say that in fact the daughters had the right intention. So their sin with the positive intention was actually like equal in some way to a good deed with maybe not the best kavanah, best intention. Two, another idea that's brought is how one should run towards doing a good deed. One should run towards a positive intention. And our sages point out, by virtue of the older daughter being so proactive and running towards this, she was rewarded in that her lineage would merit to marry into the Jewish people, not just the Jewish people, into the tribe of Judah and be progenitors of the Messiah. For Ruth was the Moabite. And this would happen generations, about 4 generations before the younger daughter's lineage, Ammon, through a woman named Naamah, would manage to also marry into not just the Jewish people, but into the tribe of Judah again. And that she married Solomon. So we see, wow, just one night, just one instance of a person running with that much more, intensity and intent, kavana and overall alacrity, how she was rewarded by 4 generations extra or before her sister coming into the Jewish people and into the Messianic line, right? Because Solomon carried on that lineage and Ruth the Moabite was the great grandmother of King David. So we see that both of them came into it. So the question is, whoa, dude, we just spoke about how the Torah portion of the week discusses improper relationships. And right away, you're in a sense, it's like God, made it that the Messiah's lineage would come from a relationship between daughters and their father. And in order to maybe try and answer this, we're going to use a parable, a mashal better, an example that's brought in Chassidus, mainly Chabad Chassidus, idea of a tower. And when you knock down a tower, you've got the tower and the tower comes crashing down, and the bricks that are on the toppermost point will fall the furthest from the source. So the idea is that souls that come from the highest of places tend to fall to the lowest abyss. So what higher soul could there be than Messiah? And so he fell into the abyss of the lowest, most perverse kind of lineage. And it doesn't, sure, it's a matter of, you can go even further back. We'll do it real quick. But Terach had relationships with his wife, specifically when she was in her menstrual state, which is a big no-no in Torah. Then that came forth Abraham, which of course is a messianic line. And then we have Lot and the daughters. And then moving forward, you could say Yaakov and Leah. Leah would give birth to Judah, right? And it was all trickery that Lavan managed to get Yaakov to even marry Leah in the first place. And then Judah and Tamar, another case of where there was a weird sexual relationship there. He had two sons. She married both. The first one straight out, second one levirate marriage, Yavam. And then they both passed away. And so he withheld her from the third one. And then one day he's going about his shepherding and he sees a woman dressed as a prostitute, and he's a tzaddik. How all of a sudden he decides he wants to sleep with a prostitute? It's already strange. But anyways, from that comes Peretz that we spoke about in our last year, that Peretz is the line of Messiah. And then we can fast forward to Boaz and Ruth, an old man and a young woman. And even the relationship, we won't get into it too much, but even Ishai, David's father, how there's a number of sources that discuss how he wondered if maybe his own grandfather Boaz had maybe made a mistake in his calculation that a Moabite's not to marry into the Jewish people, but a Moabite woman is allowed to marry into the Jewish people. So he started second guessing himself in his older age. And so he decided to make a conditional get or a divorce with his wife, and to take instead a non-Jewish maidservant. And the kind of condition was, if my grandfather Boaz made this correct calculation, then this will, then this will, won't be really a thing. But if for whatever reason he was wrong, then this will be just a regular goyish marriage and whatever. So it was kind of like a strange thing. And they did a switcheroo. Apparently the maidservant was very devout, very devoted to the woman of the house. And so they did a switcheroo. And so there's a verse in Tehillim that says, King David says, and I was born in sin, basically. And what is it referring to? It was referring to this whole episode, kind of. And then there's David and Bathsheba, and then, so it goes down and down, that there's a lot of the sexual, weirdness in that whole lineage of Messiah. And so the idea is that, yes, in terms of sins, in terms of lusts and temptations, there is nothing lower than, or let's rephrase that, there's nothing more powerful than the all-encompassing lust of sexuality. The snake and Adam and Eve. A lot of sources would say that he spilled his seed, so to speak. He was jealous of Adam for having Eve, and he wanted Eve for himself. So there's even a lot of sources that say that that whole episode was actually sexuality, taking the fruit. You can understand the metaphor there, maybe. So the idea of a ripe fruit or an unripe fruit, a woman when she's, at the right time versus not the right time. Anyways, we won't get into it too much. So the idea is, yes, this is the lowest thing, and yet from this will come the highest, because the greatest soul has to, so to speak, go through the greatest obstacles, the greatest challenges. And if the Messiah is supposed to be someone who leads even the tzaddikim to tshuva, you can't take someone through something or teach them something if you yourself haven't been through it, if you yourself don't know. So his lineage, in a sense, is so tainted, because he's going to be the epitome of someone who came from a low place and worked their way all the way up. And this is, in a sense, the story of the Jewish people. It's the story of life. We've spoken about this idea before, but like, maybe in nature you have all these animals vying for who's the king of the jungle, and there's a Rocky Balboa hit. It's not how hard you hit, it's how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, right? So there's something primal inside of every creature, every animal, including man, and the different cultures and ethnicities and races and men, that on some level we're all looking at each other and saying, all right, are you really like the chosen people? Are you really the king of the jungle? Well, how hard have you got hit, and how much have you kept going? How high did you get? And the story of Israel is just that our nation, so to speak, is the epitome of the people that have been scapegoated and beaten on for the longest of times. And yet, look where we are. So the Messiah represents the collective story. He's a guy that, look at my lineage, look what I've been through, and look where I got to. Now you know why I deserve the title of king. This is why I deserve the title of the priestly nation, the chosen people, the light unto the nations. And you guys can't argue with it, because on a deep level, it's true. So that's answering, I hope, one question. Now, when exactly was it the case that there was a shift in terms of relationships and what was a permissible or non-permissible relationship? Well, we know in the time of Noah, there were 7 commandments that were incumbent on all humanity and continue to be incumbent on all humanity. Only difference between then and now is that the Jewish people received an additional 606 commandments on top of those 7 commandments. So interestingly, who's the perfect example of a convert is Ruth. What's the numerology of Ruth? Resh, Vav, Taf, 606. Why? Because she took on 606 additional commandments that before then she wasn't responsible for when she became a convert. So she represents the perfect, the ultimate, so to speak, convert. And so even in those 7 Noahide laws, like for example, one of them is to establish courts, a judicial system. Every person, every people in the world should have a courts and have a judicial system that, that's something that's incumbent on everyone. So if for whatever reason it became the case that in a certain, place, in a certain civilization, these were improper relationships, then at that point, so to speak, that's one of the 7 Noahide commandments. If that's the law of the land, that's the law, and that should be accepted. So we have to say, though, that in its most fullest form, it wasn't really canonized in the Jewish faith to have improper relationships, and that these were improper relationships until maybe the giving of the Torah, because that was when we actually received these extra 606 commandments, one of which is not to marry a brother and a sister and the like. And one can ask, wait, Jacob, right? Jacob married his 2 sisters. There's a specific specification in the Torah that you can't marry 2 sisters, but Jacob did. Now, one, it was before the Torah, but even so, our sages say that the forefathers, the patriarchs, kept the entire Torah even before it was given. So it's hard to just swallow that, it was before the Torah, yet he kept the whole Torah before it was even given. There's something not savory here. So one answer that the sages give is that when you convert, you consider it a newborn. And therefore, he definitely converted each of his wives, because he married both Leah and Rachel, as well as Bilhah and Zilpah, the maidservants, right? So all 4 of them he converted. And it was something that he looked for in Joseph when eventually, he met Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. He said, wait, hold on. But you were in Egypt where there was like no Jews, and like, are these are my grandchildren? And it's like, yeah, they're your grandchildren. And he so to speak flashed the ketubah, and he showed, like, look, I did it all the right way. These kids are Jewish. My wife, I converted her and everything just like you taught me that. So when it was the case that Leah now is the first one he marries and she converts, she's considered a newborn child, so to speak. She has no longer a relationship with Rachel. She has no longer a relationship with Lavan. None of that. And so when Rachel now converts afterwards and marries, she also has, considered a newborn, no longer has a relationship with the previous, right? So they're considered no longer sisters in a sense, according to Jewish law. And, I told you, I have friends personally that their entire family converted, father, mother, children, and everything. And now it's a problem, according to Jewish law, for the daughter to be in the same room or a house alone with her father, because they're all considered newborns and they don't have that relationship. And these are some of the difficulties that come in halachically with Jewish law in these circumstances. So let's move on now to the next question. Yom Haatzmaut. Yom Haatzmaut is, the Israeli Independence Day. It's the birthday. We're now 72 years young, thousands of years old, but 72 years young. And there are the Zionists that feel that this should be an occasion to sing Hallel, sing praise to the Almighty. And it's an exception. We should be able to listen to music and play instruments because this was like a miracle. And indeed, it was a miracle. Now, it's not held unanimously in the Jewish people. Haredim or Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox definitely do not feel this way. Some of them even think that the Zionist regime is actually like, it was a bad thing, that the birth of the Israeli nation wasn't necessarily a positive thing. This isn't how we wanted things to occur. We wanted Mashiach. We wanted a Torah state, we wanted a Jewish state, not a state that was primarily Jews. So there are opinions for sure that would hold that an individual can, maybe, have leniencies in terms of the Omer on this day. But there are many others that would say no. So here in Israel, you'll find people that say Hallel in Shul, in Shacharis on the day of Yom Haatzmaut, and you'll simultaneously find people that still say Tachan, that still say, those repentance, penitent prayers, even though that on a day of a holiday, you don't say that usually, because they don't accept it. They don't think it's the case. So you should go by whatever your local rabbi, whoever you go to for halachic rulings, what he says. If your family or your community goes by a certain rabbi, and in that community it's accepted to be allowed to listen to music and everything, by all means, as long as he's a legitimate Orthodox rabbinic authority, by all means. But it's not always the case, and again, it's really a case by case basis kind of thing. Now, while we're talking about it, perhaps it might be nice to hear a quick Torah from Rav Kook. And Rav Kook spoke about the great shofar. Sound the great shofar, that shofar of redemption that, is supposed to let the whole world know that Messiah is here and that we're in that period. So Rav Kook understood this in a sense metaphorically, let's say, that there is already, with the foundation of the state, and even before the foundation of the state, just the talking of it, that there was, when people started flocking back to Israel, that there was already, so to speak, a shofar that was sound. But he said that now let's look at the halacha of a shofar, like on Rosh Hashanah, you blow a shofar. So he says there's three kind of classifications. One, the most ideal is a ram's horn, kosher ram's horn. That's the most ideal way of doing the mitzvah of shofar. He says, now if you're in a situation, according to Shulchan Aruch, Jewish law, where you don't and you can't get a ram's horn, then the next best option, according to Jewish law, is to use a horn from any kosher animal. And finally, the third one, if you can't get from any kosher animal, well, in that case, even a non-kosher animal horn will suffice. And so Rav Kook said that this can be related to how people hear the great horn of salvation, the great shofar of Geulah, that there's three kind of classifications. In line with that first one, the most ideal way is that ram's horn. That's the most ideal way of fulfilling the mitzvah. That is someone who comes back to the land of Israel, makes aliyah. What is their inspiration? What is guiding that awakening? It's to realize their fullest potential, that they realize that I am a Jew and I'm meant to live in the land that was meant for the Jews, that we are supposed to be a godly people, and I can only realize that most fullest part of myself, and I want to realize it, and I can only do it here. So he says that's the most ideal way of the shofar blowing, so to speak. That's like the ram's horn. That's how I hope that everyone will make aliyah and everyone will come back. But unfortunately, not everyone, does hear it that way. And then there's the second classification where you can't find a ram's horn. Any kosher animal will do, any kosher animal's horn. And he said that's like a nationalistic drive. He says there are people that, just like we say, America, hoorah, like I'm going to have the greatest nation and everything like that. He says there's some people that, that's their banner. That's what guides them to that we're going to be our own people in our own land and we'll be the bosses of ourselves and everything like that. He says this is a lower level. It's not that highest ideal of being a godly people, of uniting the whole world. Forget about just us as a people and you as a people. No, all of us as one, to know the one God. That's the highest ideal. The second ideal is, no, we're going to be our nation. We're going to be great nationalism. And he says then the third shofar, the least ideal, which is when you use a non-kosher horn metaphorically. This relates to those that come here to escape anti-Semitism, fear that the nations where they dwell, something bad will happen or bad things are happening and they're running away. And he says this is unfortunately the saddest manifestation of that great shofar's blow. So it's a really, I think, powerful way of looking at Zionism, at looking at the return to the land and the ingathering. What is the motivation? Ideally, it should be me and us as a people trying to hold up that banner for all of civilization and for Hashem, that we should have a temple, that the world should live to its highest, most awakened form. A lower level is just, a nationalistic drive, like any people say we want our own country. And it's great and all, it's just not the highest way. And the lowest way is to be brought here through fear and trepidation, anti-Semitism.